I'm John Greenwood, co-founder of Compliance 3. I've started life in manufacturing, manufacturing consumer goods, chocolate and jelly molds, funnily enough, in kiddies' character shapes that we sold to Boots and Tesco. And then I spent the last 25 years really in customer contact management, working with Glenn for most of the time, working with large brands, mostly around telephone, which is then call center, now contact center, and now multi-channel. So I'm been on the fintech side, more on the business to consumer, on the brand side, and looking at how the consumer interacts with brands. But you probably don't know about me. I've been lucky enough to spend 8 years of my life racing little sailing boats, which is a lot of fun. Quick little show of hands now. I've got one of these, credit card, and I'm going to read the number out. So it's Barclaycard, it's Visa, and the numbers. Right? Who's done that before? Not in front of everybody, but just done it down the phone. Right? It's done it down the phone. Right, so lots of hands up. Right? Who's done it down the phone before and wondered where the data goes? Right? And how do you feel about that? Right? Reasonably comfortable. Now then, we do it, right? And we do it in contact centres, and there are a lot of contact centres. And what we don't always understand is how secure that data is, right? There were 4 million people thought that they were it, weren't they, with the TalkTalk piece. It was a far smaller number. But if you get to the target, you're talking about nearly 30 million people were feeling really bad about where the card details were. And then call centres are big, and many of you might perceive that they're shrinking, that we're doing more online and less on voice. But there are a lot of call centres. There are around just under 6,000 in the UK. That's employing just under 750,000 people. In Europe, right, there are around 35,000 contact centres, and they're employing about 2.5 million people. The States, as you'd expect, even bigger. So around 44,000 contact centres, 3.4 million people in Asia. There's about 3.7 million people employed in the industry. And there, 1 million of those are just serving America. Now, what's two more interesting things. For Europe and the States, that's about 4% of the working population, right? 4% of the working population. And they're growing at about 4% per annum. And the way they're centred, to get a picture of it, what you've got about half the number of people employed in the contact centres, employed just 10% of the number. So these are big units, right? Difficult to manage, challenging to manage. And what we've seen is, first of all, they've grown through voice contact, but more and more as brands are getting multi-channel, we're seeing email, which we were doing last century, right? But now we're getting into social media, which is just giving more and more access into the organisation. And we don't pay these people much, right? In the UK, we pay them around 15 grand a year. And that's not gone up in real terms. That was more 20 years ago, when I first got into this game, back in the last century, right? So an interesting group. And what we're involved in, what we're looking at, is the whole compliance in that area around personal data, for sure, and around payment data, right? Now, I've got a little flip chart now. So what I wanted to share with you was just a little idea we had that risk in our area, in customer contact compliance, risk equals the vulnerability times the exposure, right? And we think that the biggest bang for the buck is reducing that, right? And we realise this is a people, process, technology thing, and there's been a lot of discussion about technology, but it is around the people. We're seeing a hell of a lot of breaches where people are involved in them, you know, inside the organisation, the disaffected employee, etc., right? But we think that people, process, technology are running around the top, but this is where the bang for the buck is. And what some of you may have come across is a scenario where actually you're asked to input your card payment details using your handset on your phone. That's one technology. Other technologies are evolving where you can push a web page and then still remain in voice contact with the customer, but then input your details through either tokenization or a web page or something like that. But what we're seeing is that to reduce this score over here is about reducing exposure. And that's right down at the customer contact level. And as an overview, my little takeout on all of this is I've spent 25 years working with brands, helping them find, get, keep and develop customers. And we've used data to do that. And we've struggled to gather data to make sense of it, and then to go out there and reduce our cost of acquiring a customer, push them down different channels, reducing cost and everything. But at the same time, we've just not kept the back end up to speed, right, in terms of securing the data. We've been grabbing it, a big land grab for customers, but we've not been bringing up the back end. So I think what we're seeing with these data breaches is just the exposure of the back end catching up, because that costs money. And I think what we've got to see is a change of attitude at the top level of the board, say, actually, we're making decisions about protecting our brand. And that's the thought that I'd like to leave you with.
Okay, thank you, John. Just to back up what John said, we've been conducting research on consumer response to breaches for some time now. And one of the things we've discovered in that research, which is pretty good research, good sample, demographically representative of the UK population, 41% of our respondents said that they would stop immediately trading with any company that had a breach, and a further 20% said they would stop doing business with that company for a long time. So 60% of any organisations that has breaches, customers are vulnerable. Now they can do stuff to keep them, of course, etc. You've seen that today, talk saying everybody's going to get a free upgrade, etc., etc. One of the most important things to consumers was that there was a rapid response by the organisation, and that they were communicated too quickly. Well, I'm a talk customer myself, and I got my letter 2 days ago, so that's rapid. And the last thing I thought was very interesting is we asked people, what should happen, and 80% of our respondents said that any organisation that had a breach should be named and shamed. So, in the consumer's view, that John's saying there's no hiding place here. So anyway, because John said that, I thought I'd share that with you.